Hi, I'm Jim Leaviss from M&G Investments, and I'm here doing the latest in our series of interviews with authors of interesting economic books. Today it's the turn of Ryan Avent, who is Senior Editor and Economics Columnist at The Economist. Hi there.
Hello.
Now, Ryan's written this really great book, The Wealth of Humans. It really takes on the idea about technology and the impact it's going to have on society. So to start with, we had automation and industrial revolution. The next revolution takes away not just blue collar jobs, but also white collar jobs. And however much education we think we can cope with, it's not going to be enough to compete with artificial intelligence and the robots, or immigrants from the future, as Ryan's colleague at The Economist once called them. So Ryan, one of the ideas in the book is about the glut of labour. We're going to end up with too many workers. Now, this is an economic theory. It's been around for a long time and people debate it. But what are your thoughts? Can there be a glut of labour?
I think there can be. I mean, I think the digital revolution is adding to the amount of effective labor that's around in a lot of different ways. In some cases by automating jobs, in some cases by supercharging globalization and bringing more workers from abroad into the workforce. And so there's just a mass of laborers competing for work. Now, there's a few different ways that historically we've handled that. Sometimes we can educate them, as you said, to make them more productive or move them to different cities where more jobs are being created. But my perspective is that if there's just too much to be easily kind of digested by the economy in a short amount of time, then what ends up happening is we see a lot of downward pressure on wages. And so when I look around and see the wage stagnation that we've seen across rich economies over the last generation, to me that's pretty good evidence that this is what we're seeing.
And the problem with wages as well is that if ever wages did start to rise for any reason, that almost encourages automation to go one step further. So taxi driver wages go up, Uber moves towards robots, cars.
That's right. The low wages have actually been kind of the main line of defense that workers have had against robots or computers taking their jobs. And so if you are an employer and you're thinking, well, do I want to invest in automation and robots, or should I just use this long queue of workers willing to work for not very much? You do that. But that actually ends up harming society over the long run because we're not investing in a lot of the technologies that we ought to be.
And the end game for this is that if we want to avoid societal unrest, then there needs to be a huge safety net, the guaranteed income idea really, or to go, a phrase that people don't generally rush towards, but a redistribution of wealth on a fairly massive scale.
I mean, I think that is the logical endpoint, right? We've always relied on work to be the way that people earn the money they need to put a roof over their heads and food on the table. And if we continue as a society to have that as the only thing that's available to people as the way to earn money, then they will continue to compete for work and with each other and hold down wages, and we end up stuck in this kind of bad equilibrium. So I think that actually we can make the system work better by doing some redistribution. Now the question is, how do we do that both economically? How do we get enough tax revenue to pay for something like an income for everyone? But then also, how do we keep society kind of peaceful and well organized in a world where people aren't going off to work every day?
And that's for me, one of the more interesting bits of the book was your conclusion that what might happen in this, if you're offering an attractive guaranteed income to society, you're attracting in people from the rest of the world or other regions, and actually the end game might be for people to become more insular and borders to be closed off, and perhaps the way that we're seeing in parts of Europe or even in the rise of Trump and elsewhere. Do you think that perhaps this globalization trend that we've been in for the past decades is coming to an end as a result of technology somehow?
I think it probably is going to face some significant challenges, beginning really with the migration component of it, which was something that featured in the Brexit debate, which is certainly a live issue in the American campaign. And a lot of that has to do with redistribution, that work is a way that people sort of show that they're contributing to society and thereby earn the right to kind of collect redistribution. As work has faded as an important role for a lot of people as they found themselves unable to get good jobs, there's, I think, a growing sense of mistrust among those who are still hard at work and those who aren't and are mostly drawing from the welfare state. And that's going to increase the kind of reluctance to make welfare states more generous, and it's going to cause people to think harder about who belongs, right? Who is entitled to earn these sorts of things. And Unfortunately, I think that's going to lead people to move to exclude those that aren't like them.
So to conclude, in your book, you talk about Adam Smith, from who the title of your book alludes. In The Wealth of Nations, he says that people do things out of self-interest, effectively, whereas you looked at some of his later work where he does talk about empathy. And your hope is that human beings become empathetic. Is that a word?
It is, yes.
It is, to people from wherever they may be around the world, and that's kind of an optimistic hope for the future that might help mitigate some of the problems you talk about. So that's your hope. What do you think actually will happen?
Well, I do think that eventually we'll get there. I mean, when you stand back and think about the possibility of having technology that can do almost anything we need it to do, it's like an enormous natural resource that we should all jointly share the benefits of. And it seems silly that we would require people to do stuff they don't want to do, work they don't want to do, or to live in poverty just because we can't come up with, this social contract that we need to share the wealth. And I think that the key to coming up with whatever that new social contract is going to be is an expanded sense of who deserves wealth. And my hope is that it will extend to all of humanity. It might take a while. I mean, looking back at the Industrial Revolution, there were changes that took place across this time regarding what people felt they owed each other and what the role of the state should be and things like that. And I think this will be a long process where we develop these new ideas. But I think I am long-run optimistic that we'll get there.
Great. The Wealth of Humans by Ryan Avent. It's a great book. And thanks very much, Ryan, for coming in today.
Thanks for having me in.